débat. Resuming debate, the honourable member for Victoria.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I would like to rise today to offer my support and congratulations to the member for Saint-Léonard-Saint-Michel for bringing this important initiative before the House of Commons. Obviously, we'll be supporting it enthusiastically. I understand as well that this motion touches on issues that are quite personal for the member and his family, and I join with the member for Brandon-Souris in expressing my sympathy and solidarity with my colleague. It's certainly my aim to support all measures that reduce the number of impaired driving accidents in Canada, and in doing so, spare families the considerable pain and needless difficulty that my honourable colleague and his family have endured. Frankly, I'd be quite surprised if there's anyone of my colleagues in this House that would not support this motion. I would hope that despite our political differences, we were all united in our desire to protect Canadians' safety. With respect to criminal justice matters, the NDP supports preventative measures. If we can eliminate the behaviours such as impaired driving that precipitate such terrible outcomes, we save lives and alleviate the heavy burden on our justice system as well. Furthermore, I'd suggest that awareness campaigns target young people before they're old enough to drive. We must instill in young Canadians the knowledge that impaired driving is extremely dangerous and can have dire consequences. We must teach our youth that it's selfish and reckless and antisocial and immoral to take these risks with other Canadians' lives. The sooner Canadians of all ages fully understand the devastating impacts of all forms of impaired driving, the faster we can reduce the number of these senseless deaths and injuries. We've seen that awareness campaigns work. Rates of drinking and driving have gone down significantly since such awareness campaigns were launched. According to Stats Canada data, in 2015, the rate of impaired driving was 201 incidents per 100,000 population. That was the lowest rate since data on impaired driving was first collected in 1986. 4% lower than in 2014. Clearly, we're moving in the right direction. But in spite of a decline in impaired driving rates over the past 30 years, impaired driving remains one of the most frequent criminal offences and is among the leading criminal causes of death in Canada. We have made significant strides forward, but alcohol-impaired driving remains a serious issue in this country. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reported that Canada had the highest percentage of alcohol-related crash deaths among the 20 high-income countries of the OECD in 2013. This reckless behaviour, Madam Speaker, is just unacceptable given our knowledge about its detrimental effects. One death or serious injury caused by alcohol-impaired driving is one death too many. I had the opportunity as a member of the Justice Committee to hear testimony from experts like Dr. Robert Solomon during its consideration of Bill C-46. And that bill would allow police to administer what are called mandatory alcohol screening measures as a way to apprehend all drivers at the stop who are impaired. This bill would allow officers to test every driver at a stop instead of relying on their subjective discretion, as is currently the case. More people are going to get caught, and more people are going to be frightened about being caught, and we hope that as a result the level of deaths and impairment and injuries will go down. The evidence is unassailable. If you look at the European countries, as Dr. Solomon pointed out, that this kind of testing is going to lead to less carnage and mayhem on our roads and highways. He said that in Switzerland, when it enacted mandatory alcohol screening in 2005, the percentage of drivers testing positive for alcohol fell from 25% to 7.6%. Alcohol-related crash deaths dropped by approximately 25%. So along with adopting these sorts of effective practices, we must certainly continue our education campaigns and commitment to support police officers in their work to eliminate impaired driving from coast to coast to coast. I also now want to talk about misinformation that exists around drug-impaired driving, particularly among Canadian youths. This is very troubling, Madam Speaker. We all talk about the dangers of impaired driving as if everyone knows it, and it's well acknowledged, but there's a lack of awareness about drug-impaired driving among young Canadians, who are still the leading demographic for impaired driving. It's imperative we take the necessary precautions to ensure Canadians have accurate information. In order to ensure safety, we have to address the misconceptions among young people and some parents that driving stoned, driving under the influence of cannabis, is somehow safer than driving under the influence of alcohol. An alarming percentage of youth actually don't think drugs impair their ability to drive, which of course is categorically false. In a document published by the Canadian Centre on Substance Abuse and Addiction, they address this persistent misconception head-on. Here's what they say. The challenge is many youth do not consider driving under the influence of marijuana to be risky, unlike driving under the influence of alcohol. Some youth even believe that using marijuana makes them better drivers, but evidence clearly shows that it impairs driving ability. More awareness campaigns that center on youth are needed to deter them from driving while impaired, especially after using marijuana." Close quote. So the idea that somehow driving stoned is going to make you a better driver is out there, and it's a very dangerous idea. So one hopes the government will take the necessary educational measures to increase awareness of this problem. Nearly 1/3 of teens do not consider driving under the influence of cannabis to be as bad as alcohol. That comes from a national study by Partnership for a Drug-Free Canada. Nearly 25% of parents of teenagers didn't consider driving while high on cannabis to be as bad as drinking and driving. So I hope, Madam Speaker, that by dedicating the third week of March as National Impaired Driving Prevention Week, we can reach primarily young people. The timing coincides nicely with spring break in most provinces, and a little reminder about impaired driving at that time is obviously a good thing. In addition to discussions around alcohol and drug impairment, I understand that Bill C-373 has been brought forward to address distracted driving. According to researchers Robertson, Bowman, and Charles, quote, in some provinces, distracted driving has reportedly been the cause of even more car accidents than impaired driving. With the exception of Nunavut, all provinces and territories currently have their own laws on distracted driving. And ultimately, it's up to the provincial jurisdiction to determine how we're going to implement these laws. So, Madam Speaker, I wish to reiterate in conclusion that the NDP is entirely supportive of measures that prevent tragedies that result from impaired driving. If we can educate Canadians about the extreme dangers of all forms of impaired driving, we can reduce the number of people who are doing this and avoid future tragedies for Canadians. Thank you.